Welcome everyone to another hobby hangout, Hoops Hobby Hangout specifically. I'm Steve. We got Adam and Joey here, the regulars, and then very casually throwing on a slick Sonics hat before, just as he joined the camera with us, is hangout friend Tim for Created Basketball Cards. And Joey, so last week I threw a little something out there unplanned about my thoughts that Kobe Bryant is A, an all-time great, but B, also one of the most over players, in the current discussion of our hobby. I think really our hobby, but also the greater basketball world. So that got you excited to maybe talk about some overrated, underrated players. So I'm gonna just take a moment, unless you guys want to interrupt me, and I'm gonna skip the good feelings, the vibes, the welcomes. I don't care what you guys have been up to this week.
Through all that.
Let me throw a little Kobe love out there to start things off, and then just as people are joining, I think we have kind of a fun little activity tonight. And correct me if I'm wrong, Joey, but some of our listeners sent some names, and we've had a chance to preview them. I think we're gonna just throw those out there and talk a little bit about underrated or overrated thoughts. I mean, I don't know about you guys. I'll maybe just quickly define. I'm not an analytics guy. I know some of our fans, our hangout buddies are. I'm definitely more of the eye test. I'm, almost, I'm in my mid 40s. I grew up with the ESPN and watching highlights and watching games. So I'm more of an eye test guy versus analytics. But when I look at overrated, underrated, I really look at the impact on the game. And specifically for basketball, a big thing for me is, did you make the game easier for the players in your team? Like, you look at the Joker, right? Jamal Murray's going to retire one day and talk about how easy the game of basketball was for some seasons because of what Nikola did, right? And so I look at, and there's no way to measure that stuff, but that's when I'm thinking of all-time greats or underrated players. That's the stuff I'm thinking of. So before I go into my Kobe rant, does anybody else want to throw a little bit out there about what the term overrated or underrated might mean to you guys as far as either collecting or being a fan?
Yeah, one thing I was going to mention was it's interesting too, like you kind of touched on there, is the thought of a player being underrated or overrated is really skewed in the hobby space. So I mean, there's definitely guys that I think if you looked at an all-time list are fairly assessed, but then you go look at their card market and it's completely skewed as one direction or another. Maybe they're too cheap or maybe they're too expensive. So it's going to be kind of a cool angle from that kind of direction where people could be technically underrated but still be worth the right money or whatever it may be.
Yeah. Do we have a angle we are rating at when we're doing this? Are we talking about their card market or prices, or are we talking about their how they're viewed on the all-time list of NBA greats?
Both, all of it.
Yeah, I think all the above. Yeah,
Yeah.
But just it's funny how somebody could be underrated maybe in reality, but overrated in hobby love, if that makes sense.
Hey, we could do that. One thing I wanted to mention, I guess, Steve, to piggyback on what you just talked about in terms of making the game easier for those around you, is I was thinking, what do I prioritize when it comes to my opinion on a player's status? Oh, so we just lost Tim here. On a player's status all time. And I think for me, it boiled down to longevity. Like, I do think I value longevity, how long you were able to not just play, but play at a high level. And then I think all around game. So if you're a one-dimensional player, if your defense is really lacking or something, I find that tended to be something I held against players.
You want to know what's not overrated? Is I'm watching while we're also talking. I am streaming on my phone the Celtics Bucks game right now, and they're at halftime. The Bucks halftime performance tonight is people dressed in blow up costumes for the holidays, dancing around in circles. So there's blow up candy canes and snowmen, and that was highly entertaining. Not red panda entertaining, but that was pretty good. Yeah, no, I think that was well said, Joey. And Adam, to your point, and a player that I think is overrated in terms of winning, but I think is underrated in terms of card value. I'm in a fantasy basketball league, and I like to always grab like one, low end card of a start, one of the lead players of my team. And this year I was like considering actually picking up a Bam card. So I went on to ComC, and his game use patches can be had for like $20-$30, which compared to someone that is used to looking at Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum, while I don't think Bam is Jason Tatum, I think you could put him at a Jaylen Brown type level as far as impact to a team. And to see his cards in, a major market with a good fan base be, a third of Jaylen Brown's, similar level patches go for, I thought was interesting. So to your point, Adam, but you can be one way as a player and a different way from the hobby perspective. Tim, anything that you wanted to add? So just kind of kick things off as far as your thoughts on the whole concept of underrated, overrated.
Well, Sam, before my internet dropped on me, sorry about that, guys. I was gonna say I think that your assessment, Steve, was pretty on point. It's not about how good your stats are in regard to playing by yourself, but how much you can make your team better. Are you turning your team into a winning team, a championship team? Are you hitting clutch shots when you need it? Are you getting everyone involved? I think that's, to me, what makes someone a great player. And when comparing, whether they're underrated or overrated, I think that that's a big part of at least my assessment, and it seems like yours as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And with that said, I think I'm bringing this up for more of a humor and just to see if it gets a little bit of clickbait, to be honest. But this is a true, honest take that I have about Kobe Bryant, and I brought a card for every player that I'm going to talk about or that might come up. So this is a 98-99 tops box topper refractor. So these are cool. They've got the refractor sheen on the front and back, like the non-protectors. Kobe Bryant, obviously a nemesis to the Celtics. He did, beat them in 2010. I've still never seen the last 2 minutes of Game 7 of the 2010 NBA Finals because I knew exactly what was happening. The Celtics were up in the third quarter. I think even beginning the fourth. They just led that game away, and I couldn't watch the celebration. Kobe Bryant is an all-time great. He was a generational player. There was times where I would argue that I would take Kobe over LeBron James to start a team, hands down. However, this concept that he is a top 3 all-time NBA player is ridiculous. And here's my argument for it, right? Is he an all-time great? Yes. Do I have a ton of respect for the players that played with him and hit their take on both being a teammate of his and an opponent of his? Yes. Do I think the narrative is skewed because so many players are in the media now that played with him and there's a little recency bias? It's what they know, it's what they remember. I do. I've heard so many players talk about their respect for Kobe, his work ethic. I've never heard one player say that playing with Kobe Bryant made the game of basketball easier. I've heard them say his work ethic rubbed off on you. He held you to a high standard. If you weren't where he needed you to be, then he just would ice you out. He held you there and it forced you to get better, but he never did anything to uplift their game. He was a volume scorer. He scored 40 points by taking 50 shots. And that doesn't take away from times where he had ice in his veins. I didn't want to see him on the court. I don't think he's anywhere near the top 10 all time. And he's sort of, ever since he's passed away, in a very tragic, I'm not bringing that up to argue anything about how tragic the loss of Kobe was. Ever since he passed away, all of a sudden he jumped into the Mount Rushmore of all-time NBA players. And I just think he's a very odd case that you can be an all-time great, a true generational player. There were times where he was the best player in the world, but he's not one of the greatest basketball players in the top 5, or even, I think, even 10 to play the game of basketball in the history of the NBA. So you can be both overrated and an all-time great, and that is my spiel on Kobe Bryant. Respect him on the court, don't really respect him off the court for many reasons, but that's my little spiels. And I see some of you shaking your head, so I'm going to pause and let you guys, respond or rebuttal me, and I'm going to just see what's going on in the chats here while you guys do that at the same time.
So I'll chime in here on Kobe. I grew up loving Kobe. To me, he was a generational player. I think to everyone he was. But at the same time, you're right. There was a lot of teams he wasn't making people better. He was a little bit by himself, so to speak. He can blame it on the GM or the rosters or trades. But I don't think he's ever been known, like Steve said, to make his teammates better. He shows up when they need him at the end of games. He was the best shooting guard, maybe best player in the world. I think probably undoubtedly at times. But I just think that was a huge thing with him. MJ, I think, did make his teammates a little bit better. He kind of had that chip on his shoulder like Kobe did too, of course. Kobe tried to emulate that. And I think to his detriment sometimes. And while he's, to me, perhaps the best shooting guard I've ever seen live, because I never got to watch Michael. I don't think I would put him in the top 3 by any stretch. I think growing up, born in 95, we were watching him in his prime. He was so cool, and no one could knock Kobe because he was just so cool. He was winning championships, and even when they weren't winning, he was going for 80. You know what I mean? He was just, no one else was doing that, and he deserves that respect. But top 4, Mount Rushmore, no way. And I think, I'll even go as far to say Tim Duncan had a better career, more accomplished career, better leader. I think overall more efficient, helped his team more. That may be another battle to fight, but that's one of those hills I would die on, And
Preach.
well, Kobe Bryant, I love him, but I think that his aura, as the younger kids say these days, his aura was so infectious that everyone loved him, and I did too. But when it comes down to who's better, who made their team better, I would say Tim Duncan and a couple other names perhaps too.
The only thing that I think I would add, and I agree with pretty much everything you guys said, the only thing I think I would add is that, well, I have one thing to add in one question. The thing I have to add is I think that Kobe's defense too is in maybe the latter half of his career, like he was still making all NBA, all defensive teams. I think well beyond the point when he was still a good defender. I mean, he had a stretch when he was an elite defender, but I think his reputation as well as just his status in the game made him allowed him to make more all NBA teams than he probably should have. So I think that from that perspective, it's his defense gets overrated, at least in terms of thinking longevity of his career. I agree. I can't fathom how people make him top 3. And that's going to lead me to the question is he one of the more polarizing people in terms of like over and underrated? I mean, I think even LeBron, I mean, obviously LeBron, some people have him number 1, some people have him, I don't know, 4 or 5, but I feel like with Kobe, there's some people have him top 3 and some people have him number 15 or something. There's just like, it's just crazy to me how big of a variance there could be in how people rate him.
Right, there's a very how dare you, when you mention Kobe Bryant, and we could talk about how great he was, but like when you bring up certain things that are not really debatable, like you mentioned the defense at the end of his career, Tim Duncan, end of his career, by the way, he was winning championships at the end of his career, and he was not just hitting clutch shots, but he was really defending well at the rim at an old age. And I don't think you could say the same about Kobe in 2012, 2013, before he had those injuries. So I think that's a great point.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with everything we've said so far. I definitely think he's overrated in the sense of a Mount Rushmore kind of perspective. And you look at it too, the people you put in that, at least 1 and 2, most people are going to put LeBron, they're going to put Jordan. At any point in their career, up until maybe right now for LeBron, was he not the best player on the court on his team? Kobe wasn't for 3 of his championships. So I think there's something to be said there to where no matter how great he is, that's the kind of the spin-off of it. Jordan won 6 out of 6, by far the best player on the court at all times. LeBron, for every team he's been on until right now, Luka's better than him. He's been the best player. So just having somebody that isn't that being compared to them is just ridiculous, I think. You do the same thing with like Magic and Kareem. Both are all-time greats, but they're on the same team. If Larry Bird had Kareem, nothing against Robert Parrish, he's going to win more. It's just a given.
Yeah, and I think that's well said, Adam. And that point about the Shaq comparison being on Kobe's team and the leader and the most dominant is something that gets brought up by the people that want to bring that in. It is very polarizing, Joey. The other thing that I think is interesting is I do listen to a lot of podcast content. A lot of it is former players, and when you hear people talk about guys like Magic Johnson and having to play against him, or Jordan or LeBron, they talk about not wanting to step on the court against those guys at times. Because they were just so ferocious and they didn't ever know how to guard them. Most of Kobe's contemporaries would say they wanted the challenge. They wanted to be on the court with them. So there's just that next level of challenge and dominance that I think the players that I would put Tim Duncan, Magic Johnson, etc., above Kobe is important to consider too. But I think,
If I could
very
jump in, sorry,
respected player. No, go for it.
sorry to interject, but and I'm sure you've thought about this, Steve. If Shaq wound up in Boston in 1998 or whatever it was that he moved over to LA, I think Paul Pierce would have, he would in a way take his spot. I think maybe he wouldn't have gone for 80, after Shaq left, but I think that Shaq really helped Kobe a lot in his image.
Tim, that was the best big market tease we've had on this in a while, because I think, Joey, that should spin us right into some of the feedback that we've had from some of our fellow hangouters as far as players that they want us to discuss, and I believe Shaquille O'Neal might be on that list.
Yeah, for sure. And I guess before we do that, do we want to do that little activity? We can start it off with Kobe and Shaq. The thing that I was thinking is something I saw on baseball card podcast, Spitball and Cards. They were doing something different. Like, it was not about overrated, underrated legacies, but when they put a name out there and put a rating. So I figure we could do something similar, like on a 1 through 5 rating, how underrated 1 to overrated 5 or properly rated 3 is like the person we're talking about. I feel like we probably have probably a consensus on Kobe, but for Kobe, what would you rate him on a 1 through 5 in terms of rating?
5.
I would put him at a 5 too.
And again, it's not an all-time great. It's just that he's not top 3, and it sounds silly because you're talking about like maybe 10 positions of shift, but that 10 positions is everything. I mean,
Totally.
it's a huge shift from being a Mount Rushmore player to being a 14th or 15th best player. So I mean, although he's still great, he's just shouldn't even be in the conversation. I just think my generation, I'm similar in age. I was born in 94, just idolized him so much that they didn't see what happened before. They have ignorance to it. They don't even care. Nobody was better than Kobe, except for maybe Jordan, except for maybe LeBron. Like they don't even give any thought process to anybody else.
All right, let's stop bashing Kobe and getting and making all his fans throw tomatoes at their screen or whatever, and move on to Shaq, like Steve was saying. So somebody requested Kobe. They wanted us to eulogize him. I don't know if we did a good job with that. That was Publius13 on Instagram. Sorry that we probably did not do him any favors. But what about Shaq? What would you guys say on a scale of 1 to 5? I'll just count to 3, and then you can hold up your number. 1 being severely underrated, 5 overrated, and 3 properly rated. All right, 1, 2, 3. Oh, there's a pretty good mix. I don't know where we want to start. Tim, you're the lonesome 4. You think Shaq's a little bit overrated. Can you dive into that?
Did you have a 4 too, Adam? Or was I 3? Okay.
Yeah, you did 3.
Well, I think that no one could touch him when he was playing, particularly on the Lakers. No one. Tim Duncan did his best, but I think Shaq did a little bit more in those couple of years. But I think that when you're comparing him all time, I think a movable force when he's going downhill and posting you up, I think that he was incredibly properly rated. But I think skill around the basket in regard to footwork, it was good, but I don't think it was Hakeem good. I don't think it was Tim Duncan good. I think that defensively he was a monster, but particularly towards the end of his career, I thought he was really, really slow the last 5 or so years, and carried by a couple of younger guys, as it happens when you get older. But I think when you're comparing him to Hakeem, Shaq likes to personally say, "Oh, we beat the Rockets that one year, so now I'm better than him." I don't think so. I think that Hakeem, in his career, despite championships maybe being down a couple to Shaq, I personally would take Hakeem over Shaq. So I think that he's pretty close to being where he should be rated wise, but I think that there were a few, not a lot, more skilled big men that don't get as much credit. And I love Shaq. That's just where I stand.
I think that's. Am I the only one that brought cards too? So I have Shaquille O'Neal Magic's Immaculate Patch Auto out of 15. Adam's holding up a Magic Soul the Game Immaculate there. So I brought some cards too. honestly, Joey, I mean, it's 9:30 at night here in the East Coast, so I don't think quick on my feet this time of night. So I could have gone 2 or 3. I like a lot of what you said, Tim. I think his career is appropriately respected. I think people don't give enough credit to him for how dominant he was at his prime. There's very few players in my lifetime that I've seen that literally teams have to just plan an entire game plan around. I mean, Hack-a-Shaq was a pop culture phenomenon, right? I also think that we don't give enough credit to players that had an impact off the court too. And Shaq had his scandals, but as far as like bringing attention to the game from LSU through Orlando through the Lakers, I mean, he was a big reason, through the growth of the game, post Jordan. So I think his career is appropriately respected. Tim, you mentioned him slowing down. Trust me, we had the big Shamrock here in Boston. It was embarrassing. It was really, really embarrassing. But at the same time, I don't think Shaq gets enough credit. He was still an all-star level player by the time he was in Phoenix. Cleveland and Boston, no. But for a guy his size, I think he extended his career pretty well. So I would say appropriately respected, but maybe just as far as like how dominant he was on and off the court, a cultural phenomenon, what teams had to do to plan for him is, that truly generational. So not majorly underrated, but I think just when people look back on his career, they miss that how he controlled the game for a little bit.
I think it's interesting too because throughout his career he had almost like 3 different stages. With you and I both shared a Magic card. At that point, I would say he's reminiscent of like a Giannis style player, full court.
Yeah, he was light on his feet.
Yeah, and then you have the like probably Lakers period to Heat period where he's just a dominant force as much as anybody's seen probably since Will Chamberlain. So there's that. Then you have the start to tail off right at the end with the Suns and into the Cavs and into the Celtics. Like it's almost like he's overstayed his welcome, if you will. I almost think if he didn't have those 2 stints, you'd think of him even higher. But as a whole, I still think he's properly rated. That's why I gave him a 3.
Yeah, I think I feel like maybe. I mean, I feel like maybe I am starting to shift towards a 3 because I was thinking underrated, kind of along the lines of what you were saying, Steve. Like I do think that it's forgotten just how dominant he was. I mean, if he was that dominant, if he took care of himself and really took his craft seriously, I mean, could he? I feel like he could have been a top 3 player all time.
Well, if you give Shaq Kobe's Mamba mentality, he might be the greatest player of all time.
Right. And so I think that it gets lost in the sense that he didn't have that work ethic, and that kind of is held against him, and obviously his body started to take a turn for the worse. But yeah, I think maybe I agree. He's in the 3 level. Cool. The next person that was asked about was, I'm just going to go down the list in the order they came. Probably one that we mentioned already. Paul Pierce. We talked about Paul Pierce. We kind of alluded to him and what would have happened if Shaq ended up on his team in the late 90s rather than on the Lakers. But let's go on a count of 3, scale of 1 to 5. How over or underrated is Paul Pierce? 1, 2, 3. The Celtic fans are the ones that don't think he's underrated. That's excellent. You're gonna have to elaborate on that.
Take it off, Adam.
I mean, he's definitely a great player, and I do think he gets some shade thrown at his direction because of his kind of off the court persona. He's a nut job.
His opinions,
he's a special character, but he also had kind of that overstaying of welcome at the end of his career. But I mean, at his peak, he was a great player, and I just think he's respected as that. He's given some credit with getting the championship, getting the Finals MVP, but at the same time, he's not a top 20 player, top 25 player, and I think that's in the top 75 where he's put. Obviously not numerically ordered, but I think he's in that conversation, probably the top 40 player, 30 player, something like that. I've never really looked at where he would place, but I think people give him the respect he deserves, and saying he's not as good as Dwayne Wade is probably a fair argument, I would say. I think they're similar, but I probably give the edge to Dwayne Wade even as a Celtic fan. That's usually the big debate I've seen on the internet these days.
Yeah, I mean, I've only lived in Boston, so I have that, Boston bias, but he's a top 75 player. He was a first ballot Hall of Famer, although in Springfield, for some reason, like Chris Bosh be the headline of that night, so that still irks me. But He's got his jersey retired. He was All-American at college. There you go. Adam's got a nice green Panini 1-on-1 parallel. Nice card. Brand new to you.
New one for you, right? You just got that?
Yeah, but I just got it.
I think when people that want to give Pierce a hard time and talk down to his game, I think they purposely don't pay attention to how clutch he was. Like, I think it was you, Tim, that brought up like clutch factor. I mean, he was ice in his veins. And he was one of those players that was going to get to his spot on the elbow. And you knew it, the defense knew it, and he was going to hit the shot, right? And so he did control the game. He used his size exceptionally well. He was a much better defender than people wanted to let on. He got his space on the offensive end. But was he ever going to be an MVP caliber player? Was he ever going to be? I mean, he should have been a 2-time champion, but that was because he was on a very well constructed team. I think he's appropriately placed in history, and I mean, I could give you reasons why, like Reggie Miller annoyed the hell out of me in the '90s, and that I could like quote unquote bash him a little bit. But if you were to ask me to be honest, like I could appropriately rate him too, right? So I think Pierce falls into that category.
I don't think he's egregiously underrated, but I think that he was dealt a pretty crappy hand his first few years when some of his peers like Dwayne Wade and Kobe out of the gate had Shaq. And I'm not gonna say he is better than either of them, but in terms of Dwayne Wade, and correct me if I'm wrong, he made it to an Eastern Conference Finals without those big guys around him, and Dwayne Wade didn't.
Right.
Yeah, correct.
Yep.
And I did not like this guy. No one likes a guy who's too loud and they're playing against your team. But let me tell you, when he came to the Nets, he gave us some personality. He showed up whenever we needed him, and he was older, but he was scrappy. He knew exactly, like you said, that elbow shot, the clutch three. He knew how to get contact first, then lean back. Like, oh man, it was pretty automatic whenever you needed it. And I think a pretty underrated defender, even though he wasn't always in the best shape, he really showed up, I felt. I just think he's a touch underrated. But what a spectacular.
Yeah, and I agree with that. And I think the only thing I would add is if he's more athletic like Kobe, is he that far off from Kobe? Right? I just feel like that's why I think he's a little underrated. And I agree. I just think that
I think they're pretty close.
Yeah, they'd be pretty close. So to be a 40 to 50 rated 40 to 50 all time. Yeah, I agree. I think he's a little bit underrated. There's a lot going on in the chat, so we'll just kind of recap some of the stuff that came in. Thanks everyone for hanging out. Kyle, Sean, some new screen names I'm not familiar with. Abdi Libax and Bikanachi in here. Some love for Shaq. Lots of people reiterating and emphasizing his dominance. Let's go to one that Kyle just threw in the chat, or when we were talking about Shaq. So with our talk about Shaq, where do we think with Will and Steve? This is specifically directed to you. So let's do our rating, and then Steve, why don't you address what your opinions are on Wilt? So let's do it on the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. All right, Steve, take us away. Why is Wilt just a little bit overrated?
So Kyle's. Sorry, I went the other. I'm losing. I told you my brain's not working. I should have said 2. I would have said underrated.
Okay, underrated.
I'm losing track already. I should have just yelled it up. So Kyle's question was, based on my reasoning for Shaq, what do I think about Wilt? I'm going to put the caveat out there that I began watching Shaquille O'Neal play basketball at LSU, and I followed his entire career until his retirement, with the Celtics. So my knowledge of Shaq's game and development over time and impact on the league is much greater, obviously, than Wilt's. I'm old, but I'm not that old. I think a lot of the players, the greats, get lost over time. And I think that happens in every sport. You start getting rated based on MVPs, championships, right? And Wilt was clearly, I'm assuming Kyle's bringing up the fact that I brought Shaq's dominance and how teams had to completely plan, and hack became a Shaq became a thing, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, not having lived the Wilt experience, it was clear that the NBA was his game to play, and everyone else was reacting to it for several years. And I think if you read up on Wilt and you get to know his story and what he brought to the game and his approach to the game and being a professional back in his days, I think people would really start to just say his name even more than they already do. I think in the hobby he's appropriately respected. His cards get a lot of respect. So to Adam's point, you can have two different sides to it. But just when people are sitting around the water cooler or sitting at the bar top and talking sports, I don't know that his name echoes with the same power that it should as compared to maybe some of the more modern players from 1991.
And Bicanachi puts in the chat, Wilt, Bird, Magic, Jordan, Mount Rushmore of the NBA in terms of 4 most important players. So it's another way you can rate it. And I think we kind of alluded to that last week with Steph. There's a difference between the overrated, underrated in their cards, overrated, underrated in how good of a player they were in their careers, in their influence on the game. So the one thing I would say is the only reason I said he was just a bit overrated is because I think some people have him in maybe I feel like I've heard him as high as 2 or 3 in terms of all time as a player, maybe in their careers or whatever. I just think that to me he'd be a little bit lower. Like I think I have him just outside the top 5. So I just think that some people put him way up there, and that's the reason. But that's not to discredit how incredible he was as a player, how he was so good that he could adjust his game to focusing on scoring to getting his teammates involved, whatever. And what was the season that he focused on getting his teammates involved? How many assists did he average? Was it something I don't even remember, but it was a crazy amount. But yeah, that's the only reason I would say that. I don't know if anyone has anything to add to that.
I think you really hit it on the nail there. I would say, I always used to say that if you would put Shaq in the 60s, I think he'd do pretty similar, or at least he would push himself to try to match what he did. And I think that I'm not trying to knock Wilt Chamberlain, but I do think that it's really hard to definitively confirm Wilt smoked all these 90s centers. I think that is a kind of a given, but he never had the chance to go up against them. And the 90s guys never got a chance to play him. But I do think that they were kind of thrown in the torture chamber of big men. And so I see someone as, like Hakeem or a Shaq, as I would love to see them play against each other. But we're never going to get that. And because we're not, I don't like to definitively give it to Wilt. It's a really polarizing question. You mentioned polarizing before, Wilt versus these 90s guys. I just don't want to be definitive that he's definitely better than them. And he was a physical specimen. He was unbelievable back then. But the competition, the amount of teams in that league, it's just hard to just give it to them,
Yeah, I think one of the things for me that obviously I collect legends, so I have an appreciation for them, but he can only play against the players that are available to play against. He can't change that. He outshined almost everybody he played against other than rings. And at the same point, only one person can win every year, and it was Bill Russell, 11 out of 13 years, and he played in, probably 10 of the 13. I mean, he didn't really have an opportunity to really get the titles that you would look for a player of that magnitude. But when you look at the dominance he had in his era, it was unparalleled. Shaq never had the assist seasons. I think he averaged around 9 assists one season. Shaq never had that. Obviously, Shaq never scored 100 points, never averaged 50 rebounds or 25 rebounds. I mean, just unparalleled stats that are almost like when somebody's trying to chase a record, you don't even assume Wilt's in the conversation. You're like playing for second. So, I mean, it's hard to say that he's overrated or equally rated, I think. But most people, I think, if you asked, especially the people who put Kobe in the top 3, would give almost no credit to Wilt, in my opinion.
Yeah, and Bicanachi puts in there about his stats too. I think I heard yesterday that Wilt holds 72 statistical records, I think, in the NBA. And obviously many of those will never be touched. And yeah, Orlando puts in, what's up, Orlando? Thanks for hanging out. That he averaged 50 for a season. So yeah, I mean, statistically, I don't know if anyone comes close to him for sure. Yeah, totally. So cool. A couple other things. Hugo wants us to talk Tony Parker. And is that crazy? I guess I never registered that. He didn't make top 75?
Nope. And Hugo will out about how Damian Lillard's in and a few other players, but I challenged him to come on and shoot his shot to defend Parker. So I don't think we should talk about Tony Parker unless Hugo's willing to come on and join us.
All right. I can get on board with that. One thing that Kyle mentioned, and I definitely agree. If there could be a fifth head on the Rushmore, it's Mikan. I don't know if anyone has anything to briefly throw in about George Mikan. Obviously, he was so early in the game, but I definitely agree about his influence.
Yeah, no, and that was just to the comment about the Mount Rushmore as far as impacts on the game and development of the game. So definitely Mikan being the first league superstar, and sort of the whole game was developed around. He forced the game to develop around him in the late 40s, early 40s. So definitely one of the key contributors to driving the game to what it is. The other ones that were brought up, thank you for sharing that, Joe, were Wilt, Bird, Magic, and Jordan as like the players that are most important to the development of the NBA. And I thought that was a really interesting take.
Does Steph belong in the conversation at all? I mean, look at where we are now.
Do we really want to go down the rabbit hole of is the game better than it was 20 years ago, though?
I don't know if it's a comparison of quality, but just in terms of the influence on the development of the game. I feel like Steph's got to be up there somewhere. Maybe not top 4, but he's I don't know.
Everyone started shooting from deep as soon as he started to. Like, there were 3-point shooters, but he took it to a whole other level. And then guys like Harden and other guys like Lillard and really started to follow suit and, stretch the limit what a good look from 3 was. And I think that he had a huge impact.
The real legacy of the Warriors when we look back on it, though, and this is coming from having to live through the Celtics team that shot their way out of the playoffs last year before Tatum blew out his Achilles, is that people think that the Warriors and Steph Curry were one-trick ponies where they were just jacking up threes at an exponential rate, but that's not actually how they were playing the game. They were working for shots. And then in addition to that, Steph is a magician that can hit shots that other players shouldn't. So I really think it's, as we, down the line, I said last week, one of the things about Curry is his longevity, and he's done what other small guards haven't been able to do, is to keep his knees healthy, basically, right? His knees and hips, and be able to play through. But also, I think we're going to look back, and people want to say it's about the 3-point shot and Caitlin Clark in the WNBA and the college game starting to stretch out. But I really think we're going to look back and talk about how Curry helped the NBA use the 3-point as a weapon for smart offense. And we're going to look at teams like last year's Celtics, the Chicago Bulls the last few seasons that just look at 3-point rate and can't sustain winning, and start to understand that comparison a little more. So I think it's going to take time for us to really understand what Steph Curry and then, in relation the Warriors have done to change the game. But we have to swing the pendulum back a little bit to more of a center as far as smart basketball, where we really truly see what the Warriors have done.
You don't think they're going to do the 4-point line and then Steph will be number 1 on the Mount Rushmore?
I might turn off the NBA if we go with a 4-point line. It's just too much.
I'd rather see him go the other way and get rid of the 3-point line before they did that.
Yeah, Orlando puts in about Bill Russell has to be top 10. Do we all agree Bill Russell is top 10?
Absolutely.
Like, no question, right? Yeah.
Greatest winner in the history of the game. Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, let's jump back into one of the things that was requested from Instagram this week. So actually Sean is the one that requested Paul Pierce. Here's another one that came in that I think there's a couple that came in, but Moses Malone, that's one of the ones that came in towards the end there. Oh, nice.
You'll have to zoom in on me for this one. So this is a Hall of Fame quad with Moses Malone, Larry Bird, Kareem, and Magic Johnson. I actually bought this back when I was setting up at shows thinking I'd move it as inventory, and the reason I kept it was Moses Malone. If you want to do your ratings, my brain's not working. I'll tell you right now he's underrated. And Adam's going to flex a beautiful patch auto from Moses. 76ers exquisite
Noble
patch
nameplates?
auto. Yep, nice nameplate patch. Beautiful card, Adam.
Yeah, look at that patch. That red and green or red and white patch. Yeah, so Steve says underrated. What do you guys think? Let's do it. 1, 2, 3 on
I forgot what's 1, underrated or overrated?
1 is very, very underrated. Yeah, I'm gonna go 1 and 2.
I'm just gonna rattle off a few highlights just because I think he is so underrated. I don't think people recognize this, and I'll let you guys chat about him. He's one of only 9 players in NBA history to have 3 or more league MVPs. He won a championship in '83 with the Sixers and was the final MVP. He's well over 25,000 career points. He came out straight out of high school, I believe, right, Adam? He was one of the high school guys, came straight out.
Yeah, to the NBA.
I think, unfortunately for him, he bounced around the league and he got drafted into a very dysfunctional ABA situation. So I think and I strongly believe that the 70s are the most underappreciated era of NBA basketball, and the 80s players, from an offensive perspective, are some of the most underrated players, generational. So I think it's just at the time that he was in, the arc of his career, starting with a, like I said, dysfunctional ABA situation, bouncing around through a couple different teams, and probably hanging on a little bit too long. Takeaway, but he is one of the elite NBA players in the history of the game. I think he's very, very
not a pretty. Didn't have a pretty game too, right? I think that probably contributes. Not like the most athletic or pretty in terms of highlights. But I agree, completely agree, Steve.
Yeah, it looks like you put in the chat, speaking to Hondo about overrated. He wasn't giving him a 4. He was referencing his basically guarantee of sweeping the series. 4 games each series to the finals.
Oh, gotcha.
He ended up being successful in 2 and playing in 5 in the finals, I believe. But even still.
Thanks for clarifying.
Yeah, no problem. But a lot of people that you listen to get interviewed and things like that, if they played with him, he was like the backbone of every team he played on. He was the veteran player. He was the guy that gave all the tutelage to a lot of guys that came after him. So, I mean, I think he is appreciated in the sense of the players that played around him. But in terms of fandom today, I'll agree with Steve. When you start looking at guys from the 70s, they're almost always forgotten because it's the pre-Bird era. And then quickly you have Jordan after that, and he gets all the shine, and you take away from everybody outside of like Bird, Magic, Kareem in the 70s or 80s.
I think that's well said, Adam. And, when we talk about big name centers, we talk about Wilt, we talk about Kareem and Hakeem and Shaq and David Robinson. You don't really hear much about Moses. And, I think I probably watched the least of this guy, in his highlights than all 4 of us here. But I do know, I think he's a better rebounder than Kareem based on what the stats are showing me. And when we talk about the 76ers in the 80s, all I hear about is Dr. J. There were other guys in that team, Cheeks and others, but I feel like Moses and all those 80s documentaries with the Lakers and the Celtics, you never hear much of anything about Moses. And like you said, Joey, it's because his game wasn't so sexy. He didn't really have a really a go-to move, so to speak, but he did the hard work. And I think that he definitely is underrated in my book.
Where do you guys feel like people generally rate him? I feel like, what is he around the 20 range for most people? I'm not sure.
That's about right. I would say somewhere, most people 20 to 30, I think they would probably put him in somewhere in that vicinity. But again, I think that's kind of giving him a little less credit than he deserves. And also, I think anyway, the big position is the hardest one to really rank the players. Because there's just so much skill at the 5 at center, and you start talking about guys, is he better than Will? Is he better than Russell? Is he better than Hakeem, Shaq? It's like they're different players. They're not the same in any real respective way. So I don't think he's necessarily better than them, but at the same time, he's in the conversation that he needs to be put into the kind of the talks with them. And there's just so many good players at the center position that I almost feel like in the top 20, they should have 10 spots, even though it's only one position.
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely have him closer to 15 than 20, I think. But yeah, Kyle mentions how Panini did a good job getting patches from all of his teams. Yeah, very cool. All right, let's go back to the requests. Just kind of go in the order that they came in. The first one that came in, and I don't know that we're going to spend a ton of time on this. First one that came in was Jason Williams. Sacramento Kings, let's go. Number 1, underrated, completely underrated. Yeah, I mean, of course. I don't know how he's rated. Like, is he highly rated? I don't think he's highly rated.
I don't think he's that highly rated. He was just kind of cool because of his highlights. I don't know. And he was a good player, but
I think it depends on what you want to talk about as far as rated, right? And yeah, he's not going to pop up on, if ESPN every 5 years does the top 100 players in NBA history, he's not popping up overrated on that. But one of the things, there you go, Adam. That's a beautiful card. But I think there are a few players from the mid to late 90s that have so much nostalgia behind them and had so much and one jazz behind their game, et cetera, that I think their love and the nostalgia that follows them, they're kind of like a movie that if you went back and watched it today, you'd be like, this didn't age as well as I thought, right? And so I put Jason Williams in that. I love Penny Hardaway. I put him in that category a little bit. And not saying these guys weren't elite at what they did for when they did it, but I think there is, especially from the hobby perspective, maybe that's where I'm thinking of this take, that the appeal of them is a little bit higher than where they rate compared to the other players that were probably dominating the game at that time. So I wouldn't say. I just think his pop culture aura has carried further than I think his career would have, deemed, just based on the time and way he approached the games. No hate against him. I love the guy, but well, he's kind of creepy. Like, isn't he the one that's all jacked up on steroids now? Like, he walks around like, isn't that?
That's Mike Bibby.
That's Bibby. That's right.
He's the one who, like, somehow in his after retirement, he just got jacked up.
Just magically, yeah.
Yeah.
That's right. That is Bibby.
No, I agree. And I think to add to that, Steve, like, that's extends to his card prices. Like, I think culturally, you can say he's underrated over. I mean, he was super flashy, so I guess he's properly rated. Culturally, his card prices are way exceed his quality as an NBA player. And to the point of Mike Bibby, I mean, there's a reason the Kings improved as a team, became a better team, and went further in the playoffs when they traded Jason Williams for Mike Bibby. So, I mean, I love him. I obviously, I mean, I became a fan of the Kings when he was their point guard, and probably he initiated the greatest show on court, flashy, pass first, unselfish play style. But man, as an all-time player, obviously, I don't think he belongs anywhere near an all-time list in that sense. Here, this is my auto of his. It's Stadium Club rookie.
Nice. Did you get that done yourself, or did you buy it?
No, I bought it. I was looking for a one of a kind parallel of this.
That looks great.
Yeah, and I was like, I love the silver marker too. But I was looking for a one of a kind parallel of this, and it was like $100, and I'm like, why would I just not buy this for $25? Whatever. So
I'll just quickly chime in before we move on to the next guy. Like you said, all of you, he was definitely culturally cool and he was super flashy. He brought a different flavor to the point guard position, but, he wasn't much of a scorer. And I think didn't really have the accolades to be anywhere near, top 100. Just coincidentally, he kind of rose at the same time as Eminem rose. So that kind of helped make him cool at the same time. But I definitely am a fan of his, but we're rating guys that are sniffing or in the top 100, and Jason's not in there, so I kind of put him at 3 just because he is what he is. He's cool. He's a solid player, but that's about it.
Yeah, we may for this next one we may need to consult Kyle, because the next one is Jermaine O'Neal. So Kyle, if you have something you want to preach on Jermaine O'Neal, make sure you jump into that.
Yes, Sean, I brought a Jermaine O'Neal card. This is a triple threads of Jermaine O'Neal, Marc Gasol, and Dwight Howard, and I could argue that all these guys are mildly underrated. Jermaine, I did not appreciate Jermaine O'Neal. That's beautiful, Adam.
Yeah,
exquisite. What set of is that? Just the patch auto? What
limited logos?
That's beautiful.
Yeah, it's a limited logos.
That's right. Yeah. I did not truly appreciate Jermaine O'Neal until he came to the Celtics during their 2009 to like 2011 run, where they were just taking bigs off the scrap heap. But went back and looked in his career a little bit, and Jo is definitely an underappreciated player. He was more dominant than I think people give him credit for, and obviously that 05 Pacers team flamed out due to the brawl, but he really controlled the game, and we talked about footwork. I mean, his footwork was impeccable. So I'll give a big underrated to Jo. Not like an all-time great, shouldn't be up on any sort of like even team Mount Rushmore, but he really controlled the game for several seasons. He was fun to watch.
Indiana definitely needed an upgrade from Rick Smits. He was running out of gas by the end there. So I think O'Neal kind of stepped in offensively, but especially defensively too, as Reggie aged. Obviously a different position, but he helped keep them really competitive through the 2000s. And, I was just thinking this year. Tell me if I'm missing a name. A lot of the big men in the 2000s are from the West. I know Ben Wallace is a Hall of Famer. Defensively, he smokes everyone in that era. But all around, is Jermaine the best big in the East in the 2000s? Who am I missing someone? I got to be missing someone.
Depends on what years you want to look at. I mean,
Yeah, it's tough.
I mean, I'm not talking about 2 years of a player, like someone who was in the East for almost the entire decade.
like the early, yeah.
Like Ben Wallace, obviously defensively, but all around, who is better than Jermaine?
Yeah, I mean, I can't think of anyone.
Yeah, I mean, obviously it's Ben Wallace was the best, and then towards the later half of the decade, Dwight Howard was one of the most dominant players
For sure.
to ever play that position for several seasons.
Right.
He didn't have longevity. Jermaine's up there though. I mean, he really, when you go back and actually look at his career, like I said, he had offensive game that most other bigs at his time didn't have, and he was an underrated defender. So you're on to something there for sure.
Well, Dwight was better all around, yes, but he only played half the decade. And then Ben Wallace, easily best defensive big. You can argue one of the better defensive bigs of all time, but not a lot of offense. So I'm just saying, in the balance and in terms of offense and defense and the 10-year span in the East, or almost 10-year span, I think
you hit the nail on the head for sure. I mean, yeah, Dirk, KG, Duncan, all in the West, right? For most of the 2000s. So
not an all-time great, but I think he deserves a little more flowers.
There's one that came in the chat, so we're just bouncing back from Instagram to chat. Orlando said, thoughts on Dwayne Wade. So take a second to contemplate. And then on the count of 3, your rating. 1, 2, 3.
I'm tapping out of this one because my bias will not allow me to participate appropriately.
All right, you guys say overrated. Why do you guys say overrated? Tim and Adam.
No, I mean, I think he's a very good player. I talked earlier about how I'd probably give him his kind of credit over Paul Pierce, but I do think he's given a little too much credit for a lot of people. Again, just kind of goes back to the recency bias of most people kind of think of the NBA and you hear it talked about from kind of Jordan on. And I think shooting guard position has one of the biggest fall offs from like the best players of the best and then into that next tier. I mean, you have Kobe and Jordan, and then the drop off to the third guy is pretty substantial. And I think he is in that conversation of like Clyde Drexler, him, and you have other guys that are kind of PG, SG pivot players where you could say Allen Iverson or Oscar Robertson or whoever that played both sides. But in terms of a true shooting guard full career, the drop off, if you call him third, is drastic. So I just think that he gets put in that he's a top 3. It's like, well, yeah, he's top 3, but he's top, I don't know, 50 player, I don't know, 50, 30 player all time, 35 player all time. The other 2 guys are top 15. I don't know.
I think he was an incredible shooting guard, but I also think he was dealt an amazing hand at times. Walking in to play with Shaq in his second year, second year, and then the big 3. I think that kind of helps mask his lack of 3-point shooting ability. And a lot of these other guards, like let's say, obviously Kobe's better, but you put a prime Reggie in this era, he smokes Dwayne Wade. So I don't think there were a ton of high volume shooting guards in that era. And I think while he is an all-time great, I do think if you're a shooting guard and you're not a really good 3-point shooter, there's definitely, like Adam said, a big drop off from Kobe and some others in the all-time greats too.
And you bring up landing with Shaq. It wasn't just Shaq. I mean, that team. We talk if you listen to a lot of like modern content, they talk about the lack of vets on a team and a young player coming in and not knowing how to land on his feet. He had Shaq, Alonzo Mourning, Antoine Walker, for all his faults, was a very good 6th or 7th player for that team. Gary Payton to lead the way and show him how to be a guard in the league. Was Jason Williams on that team, right? Like, there were vets that had been through the trenches of the 90s, played against Jordan, played against the Pacers, played against the Knicks, played against the Lakers of the early 2000s, won with the Lakers of the early 2000s, and were there to help establish a culture for a young, offensively gifted player to land. So I can't stand Dwayne Wade. He I think he's dirty. I think he's slimy. I can't stand it. So, but I think the hands that he was dealt, I think that's a good way to put it, Tim. I mean, and he was never the best player on his team. I thought for sure I was down on LeBron going to Miami, and I thought, he's going to go ride Wade's coattails. No, nope. LeBron won the first championship for that Heat team, and he was the leader of that team. He really stepped up in his move to Miami. So I think that's a good point about where Wade got to spend his career and who he got to spend it with. And it doesn't mean he didn't participate and really give some great performances to it, but didn't break it. Hondo's saying that Wade broke Rondo's arm. He ripped it right out of his socket. I mean, he fully grasped it and just yanked down on it with all his body weight. It's so dirty.
And Dwayne Wade, I think, probably was the best player on his team at times, like after Shaq left, and then after the big three for a little while, and then when he returned, and well, maybe not when he returned, but I think that those teams didn't do that.
Yeah, I guess I was ignoring that.
Yeah, and as the only person who said slightly underrated, to be fair, I'll preface it by saying I don't actually really know where he's rated. Like, I think, Adam, you maybe had referenced
way up there,
top 50, top 30. Yeah, I mean, I definitely wouldn't put him in the top 25. I haven't fleshed it all out. Maybe I would say top 30 or 35. I guess I just, in my head, he would not be in that top 30 probably, or maybe he's fighting for top 35 or something. And I just think that I felt like he did have a really good two-way peak for a while. And forget at what point, one of his seasons, was really, really elite on both sides of the ball. And I guess that's just a short span and, injuries, and he was never the best player on his team. Yeah. So I don't know, but just some random thoughts I'm throwing out there. Let's throw in one more, because there was someone who shared 3 players on Instagram, and we didn't touch on any of them yet. So I'll list them all off, and you guys pick which one you want to talk about. That's Giannis, Donovan Mitchell, which I guess would not be the person we talk about, and Charles Barkley. So do you guys have a preference on which one we tackle, or we can do them all real quick? I don't know.
Why don't we just pick one that we want to chat about, or we can chat about the same. Being the oldest one here, will chat about Charles Barkley because I watched most of his career. I think he's very appropriately placed. I think people recognize how dominant he was. He was not a perfect player by any stretch of the imagination. I think he's one of the few NBA players that gets his flowers despite not winning a championship. And I think that says a lot given the ring first culture of NBA fandom. His place in international basketball, his college career is even spoken about occasionally. I think he's an all-time great. I think he's respected appropriately. And man, has he really stepped up his game post-career. I thought he was going to be one of these guys that just goes off and makes a mess of himself. I mean, he's a joy to listen to and follow as a commentator too. So I think he's very appropriately placed. And I really enjoyed watching, his career.
I think he was appropriately placed as well. I didn't watch him like Steve did, but I've seen a lot of documentaries and highlights and whatnot. And I think the one thing that Charles Barkley will have over every NBA player is that he's the poster child for playing above his weight. And in terms of, he was 6'6", and he was able to have not just double doubles. He averaged 13, 14 rebounds at times. He was just a monster, and he wasn't that big. And he was playing in the prime of the golden age of big men. So I think that definitely appropriately placed.
It's interesting though, because maybe somebody knows his wingspan will come back and shame me, but he played so long, especially in his Sixers days. He was springy when he was younger, and his arms just always seemed to extend above others. He just had great position. He knew how to box out. He knew how to use his footwork. When he was in Phoenix, I mean, they had some very good players, and I'd say, players that, have not been, appreciated, the Marleys of the world and stuff that were very good players. But if you go back and look at some of those Phoenix rosters and realize what, where he brought them to, I think people will really appreciate him even more. He was a really fun player to watch. And,
Yeah, there's not a lot of players that take that 93 Suns team to the finals, right?
no.
You guys want to do Giannis really fast? I feel like Donovan Mitchell, he's probably not up there enough to like really discuss. Yeah. But what do you guys, where do you guys have Giannis, or where do you think he's rated?
I'm not sure where he's placed by like overall standards, but I would kind of put him in my opinion of where he's at in similar regards to like Dwayne Wade. I don't like him as a player. I can appreciate what he does for the game, but I think he's also getting a little bit of recency bias by just being so lanky and so good for now, what, almost 10 years, probably, of being one of the best players in the league. But I think as time goes on, he's not going to be somebody who's being talked about in a top 10 or top 15. So I really need to see what somebody's opinion of him would be in terms of, I think he's 15th all time. I would disagree with that, but I think most people would put him in that 20 to 30 range, and I think that's adequate.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's probably pretty properly rated, because from what I've seen, I feel like he's probably around the 20-ish to 25. I mean, I don't know exactly. Like, again, I haven't put out an entire list or anything, but I feel like that's probably pretty fair. I think that he's had dominant two-way play for, like you said, going on 10 years now. And so, multiple MVPs, defensive player of the years, like you can't deny what he's accomplished. And obviously, man, his game 6 in that, what was it, 2022 finals? I don't remember exactly the year.
Yes. Yeah. I think it was
like
2022.
game 6 of the 20, that is legend. That's stuff of legend right there. Obviously one game doesn't make for a top 20 player, but I think that you guys talked about people game planning like specifically for him. I mean, people game planned for like Giannis. They had to, their entire strategy had revolved around Giannis and stopping him from getting to the paint. And I mean, the problem is, I think the reason I would say in that 20 to 25 range, I'd have him closer to the 25 range, is there was just enough weaknesses with the shooting and free throws that he couldn't overcome. So obviously he still has some time to go, but we'll see.
Yeah, he still has some work to do. But so we'll see where he lands when it's all said and done, because I think he's going to maybe join some better rosters coming up. But unlike Dwayne Wade, he brought the team and put it on its back, and he turned it from nothing into something. And I think that the defensive players of the year, the performance in that finals game you mentioned, he just has, and he's a great leader. I think he's a great leader. Right now, he's a little drama because he's about to be traded. But when the team is locked in, he always says the right thing. And I think that when it's all said and done, he has the opportunity to sniff the top 10. Not yet.
I'll disagree with that only. And the two MVPs are legitimate. He brought that team the championship, but I think his offensive game has plateaued too much, and I actually think he stepped back from trying to grow his offensive game and is playing within his lane and dominating. But I think he would have needed to take that next step to extend his career and extend his dominance to get into the top 15 to top 10 range down there. And maybe that changes if he joins some super teams, but I think the super team era of the NBA is done. Him stepping away from even his Kevin Garnett mid-range jumper and really just focusing on post moves and elbowing people in the face as he drives to the rim on an 8-step travel but gets a foul call, is I think he was working towards extending his range and diversifying his offensive game. 2 or 3 years ago, he sort of stepped away from that and just sort of settled into where he is. I think he would have needed to continue to evolve to, improve his place over time. But he's still only halfway through his career, So.
Right. But it will be a great measuring stick when it's all said and done. Him, Garnett, who did more when it's done. Yeah. I think that'll be a great combo.
That will be a good conversation. All right. We call it here. There are a couple more we can talk about, but I think this is probably a good place to call it, unless anyone has anything or anyone they want to talk about.
No, I think this is fun, and maybe we do this again someday. But maybe we like focus on we can go all big, so we can go all role players, or maybe we'll do something different. But I think this was a good. I don't know how people are feeling about it, but I know I really enjoyed this one, Joey. So good concept for Hangout. I enjoyed this one.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. I don't know if it's a bad sign that it was like the least card focused of everything we've talked about, but definitely.
I brought cards.
I showed a card.
And Adam's always got. I could have probably brought up any player. Adam would have been flashing some great patch autos. So.
I know he's holding back. Well, also thanks everyone for hanging out. I feel like this is the most active we've had in terms of chat and lots of opinions shared. Thank you. Lots of suggestions on who to talk about. So thank you. Thanks for hanging out. And I think the answer here is up for
overrated.
So
yeah, as individuals, we're all overrated. As far as the conversation, hopefully it's
underrated. Is the sum greater than its parts? I guess that's yet to be determined. But thanks everyone for hanging out. Hope you guys had fun. Maybe we'll do this again. If you ever feel inclined to join us, obviously there's always a QR code, and let us know if you want to jump on with us. Have an awesome week. We will see you guys all next week.
Be well, guys.
See you guys.